past 4th right now, so you should be here any minute.
Oh, somebody's coming through to do.
Yeah, not the
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes, yes. God bless. You are now tuned into the Hood Center podcast. My name is Thurd, a.k.a. Young Tres de Mayo, a.k.a. in case you don't know that I know, man. This is special today. This guest here is very dear to me. This guest means the world to me. And before I start getting emotional, I'm going to, talk about his accomplishments, and we're going to ask some questions before I introduce him to the world. So, when we talk basketball, we talk 15 years of coaching. We talk former MIT champion, former Nike Swoosh champion, nationally ranked 3 times in a row, twice coming in 3rd place, once in 4th. And what I want to add, actually, because I was there firsthand, just his incalculable efforts when it came to training kids, when it came to interacting with parents, having their kids' best interests, giving kids rides home, giving kids rides to their house when they didn't have money for the train, taking them in his car when they lived too far, certain things that I just experienced, and just his demand just for excellence and hard work. Ladies and gentlemen, my dad is here today, and this is big. So, Dad, welcome.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. He has his suit.
I'm here to debut the music.
Yeah, his suit. His suit is very crispy, yo. His suit is very crispy.
It's supposed
I might add. Absolutely. Let's get right into it. I actually want to ask a question that
Sure. Well, this is just what we didn't do is just prefix it with AAU basketball, just to give AAU basketball a big up. And what they do, and all the coaches and assistant coaches, and just everybody that contributes to that whole platform to keep kids, young men and women, occupied in the sport. So a big up to everybody that's doing that.
Yeah, big up to AAU basketball. Big up to the sport. Dad, talk about your transition. Basically, from where you started and just till now. Just talk about it.
What are we doing?
By the way, guys, this is Riverside Hawks family in here. So for those of you that don't know, big in New York City, it was always Gauchos and Riverside actually going head to head. My dad coached me when I was about 12 years old, all the way up until 17, 18, until I actually had the privilege of going to boarding school. So had the best of both worlds. Talked about that in the first episode.
Yep.
And just talk about that transition, Dad.
Yeah.
From where you started.
Yeah, so I started. It's a little bit different for me because I started from the outside in.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't technically in the basketball circles. So I started from the outside. So it was just a lot of people probably felt that I didn't belong because I didn't come up the traditional way where I played AAU sports, or AAU basketball rather. So I just knew that I didn't want anybody else coach him, or at least at that time I didn't see anybody else that was not only technically sound to coach my son, but just didn't feel like that they had his best interest in mind. So for me, it was, okay, so then I have to do this. So
right.
I just got a really lucky break because, as you mentioned, Riverside Gauchos, big organizations in New York City, the biggest, with the biggest stars coming out of both of those programs.
Right.
So I just happened to just be in the gym at the right time. You know, I call it the proximity principle, just being in the right proximity and just being ready. So when that opportunity came and they said they needed help, I was there. And I just had to work my butt off. And that's what you do when you're working from the outside in. You just,
right.
you have a different perspective. You see things differently. you see you don't just walk into a gym and say, okay, it's time to put time to get the balls out. You see the dust on the floor. You see that people didn't clean things up because you just see the game. You just see all of this stuff differently. So it just gave me a different perspective, and I ran with it. And big up to everybody at that time who allowed me to do that. Tony Hargraves, Mark Jerome, the list goes on.
Yeah, Tony Hargraves, former Mr. Basketball. Mark Jerome, director of Riverside Church.
At that time, yeah.
At that time, absolutely.
Jason Armstrong.
Big Jace.
Yep, so just a lot of people.
I want to talk about, so now you coach me, you come in, because I remember being about 11, 12 years old, coaches that, like you said, weren't actually technically sound. And to be honest, if we're being truthful, really didn't have my best interest and I do remember that, actually. So, however, you did coach me all the way up to 17, 18, but then you got an opportunity to start all over with the 9U.
Right.
So a lot of times, parents are just interested in their kids, you know what I mean? And they train their kids and then they just go off from there. However, you love the game, of course, and you started from the 9Us when I went off to high school and began to start college, and then you started there with that journey. So just explain that transition and the pros and cons of that, actually.
Well, I mean, in a nutshell, I had to scratch that itch. It was just you were going off to high school, and so I'm left in the gym by myself, and I see the same things in the team that I took in that was in their eyes. I seen the same thing in your eyes before. So for me, it was just basically, I can do this, and I had got better at doing it. So that's where I really figured that I really want to take advantage of this opportunity, because I just felt that I was better at my craft, and the fact that you were in Massachusetts, it just made it easy for me to just say I'm just going to go all the way in, and so I did it, and it was one of the best things I did as far as basketball is concerned, especially from a winning perspective. Unfortunately, you and your crew
very tough. I'll cut you off and say that very tough times, ladies and gents.
We all had to learn together.
Yeah.
So
I still remember that. I still remember that first chip though. It was on 135th. I still remember that.
Yes, sir.
And that was our first chip.
Yeah.
Your first chip, my first chip. AAU.
Absolutely.
That was big. In the YMCA on 135th Street in Harlem.
Yep.
Big up to Craig, big up to Greg, all of the players that I played with. Kev from Rice, I remember.
CJ.
Yeah, CJ, Big Siege.
Yeah.
I remember that. That we talk for hours off and on this, we don't need a podcast. We talk for hours, you know what I mean, just off the phone calls. And a lot of things that you shared with me from coaching the nines was dealing with the parents.
Right.
Because at that age, you're not really dealing with the kids per se, just with the game when the whistle blows, of course, but dealing with the parents outside of that. Can you explain that? What were the challenges dealing with parents?
For me, the only challenge for me was just keeping it in perspective that I know how they feel. I was in their shoes before, so especially, practice is where it's all at. When it's game time, everybody's engaged in game time. But practice is, when I talk to younger coaches or any coach getting in the game, it's just so important to understand that the people you're impressing in practice are really when you're playing in young AAU are really the parents. They really want to see if you know how to teach a kid how to set a screen and what's your ball handling skills. Like, all that stuff is really, you got to be technically sound. And so when parents can see that, when they see that you're technically sound, they allow you to coach their kids. But they're on reserve there. I was. So, just for me, it's just basically understanding that I'm coaching, I'm trying to impress two sets of people, the kids that we're coaching, and also the parents in the stand, because they're giving them to you. So you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So that was important.
It's funny because sometimes we joke about because I watch my dad, I watched him coach, I watch his interactions with parents and just learn from him. I just watch from afar, and when we talk, it's funny because seeing it in other places, in other environments with coaches, and we laugh and we say parents want their kids to be LeBron James like immediately. You know what I mean? Especially at 9 and 10 years old, they just want them they just have this thing in their head. They just want them to go D1 and go to the NBA, but it's such a process. And speaking on that process, when you talk about setting screens and being technically sound, I feel like me and you grew up learning with each other, because at one time I was always stronger than everybody at one time in my career, probably like around 13, 14. We were really focused on the physical aspect of the game, making sure my body was right, making sure I was healthy, and it worked tremendously. However, when we look back at it as we get older and gain more wisdom about the game, we talked about we should have really locked in on the actual technicalities of the game. So if you want to speak on that, what's the importance of that growing up?
Yep. So if when I'm giving advice now, or when I'm just asked, I'm not giving. I mean, I'm not telling anybody what to do. But my suggestions are always look at the tape, look at the film, because when you get your mind right and you just figure out the game and you're just smarter at the game than everybody else, everything else starts to fall in place. You want to get your body right? So, for example, if you take somebody off the dribble because you know how to do a head and shoulder fake, you take somebody off the dribble and then you get to the hole, but you only got your right hand, right? It's automatically going to kick in that I need to get my left hand.
Right.
So we put the cart, unfortunately, because we're learning, right? We put the cart before the horse. We would just let's get to the hole with our left hand and make sure we got our left hand right. When it was basically, how do you get to the hole? How do you do that? How do you come off a screen?
Right.
How do you put the ball back, from your right to your left hand and get to the screen and get off of that screen and get to the hole? We were basically just making sure you just was physically stronger than everybody. And then when you think about it in hindsight, you look at it and say, you know what? It's the heady players that figure it all out. And because then they'll make the commitment to their body. So it's a learning process, I think. And we were trying to get ahead of the game. We were trying to make sure that as soon as you walk in the gym and your body was right, that was almost like an intimidation factor, so to speak.
Right.
So we live and we learn, and hopefully we pass some of that knowledge on to other people. But I just think getting your head right in the game is just so important.
Right. And we learned a lot from that. And just now looking at some of these kids that we've coached and trained are in the league now, and some are playing Division I basketball. Ty Jerome, Mark Jerome's son, who's the former director's son of Riverside Hawks. We watched him grow up, and Ty was so slow in the beginning, and he was really average height, but we always complimented him on his psyche, you know what I mean, and how he looked at the game. And fortunately enough, he grew. So a lot of this, what you're saying about him, using your right hand, but when you're smart, understanding, okay, this is what I have to work on now. Right. When the physical part comes second. Right. Ty was so smart and understood the game so much, by the time he grew, that was it. You know what I mean? And then he went off, and he was New York's Mr. Basketball, which is crazy. Right. And went off to the University of Virginia. Now he plays for the Phoenix Suns. Donovan Mitchell was also a former Riverside Hawks alum. So, it's so many things about the game that you learn, and which is kind of crazy. I want to speak on, now you coach the 9Us and you go through this journey, right? Wow, it's such a cycle with coaching, as far as getting kids early, some don't grow, having to tell a kid that it's like when you're a boss, you got to tell somebody they're fired sometimes, you know what I mean? And telling a kid he can't make this cut, but he was with you probably 4 or 5 years down this line. Right. And sometimes it's unfortunate because you have winning on your brain, Right. However, you're still affecting a kid's life in some way, form, or fashion. So if you want to speak on sticking with the kids on and off the court, or understanding what's the importance, do I stay with a kid and ride with him because this kid might have been the best at 9, 10 years old, but when 13 and 14 come, he might not cut it. Right. So if you want to speak on that.
Yeah, I mean, the platform itself just tells you that it's a competitive sport. It's a gladiator competitive sport. The platform does it itself. So, but you try. I mean, when you really are engaged with kids and you really take this game seriously, you try to keep them the whole way out as long as you possibly can. Unfortunately, winning is, at the forefront of the whole process. So if I could do it all over again. I mean, well, look, basically both parents and the kids know when you got their best interest. That's the one thing about being from this from the inner city, however you want to call it, is that we always have our antenna up. Our antenna is always up, so we know when somebody cares about us. Period. End of story. Forget everything else. I mean, in my professional life, I've had to let people go in my professional life, and still I'm friends with those people because they know that I had their best interest in hand. It's not the best interest of what we're doing right now. So they have their antenna up. It hurts. It's painful. Sometimes I think it's even more painful when you take a kid from the starting lineup and put him on the bench. I think he would prefer. Sometimes I've seen kids I've talked to, after we've played the game, and they just prefer to lead the team and try to be a starter someplace else. So each person is very different. It's a case-by-case study. But at the end of the day, the point I'm making is if you care about somebody, they got the antenna up. They know that you care about them.
Right.
You just got to have that hard conversation. So
yeah. Speaking of Mark Jerome, you two guys had something in common with coaching your kids.
Right.
If you want to elaborate on that, what are some of the challenges? And then I'll elaborate on it as a son. You know what I mean? What were some of the talks that you guys had, and what were some of your experiences?
Right. Well, I mean, the advantage that Mark had and Tony Hargraves, that they have second generational. They're doing this for they're second generation. They play basketball at a high level than the kids. So what I would try to pick their brains on is just what does the next level look like. And when I'm talking about next level, I mean from 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12. What does that next level look like all the time? We always have those conversations. But being a second generation or third generation basketball player, there's just some things that, I'll give you a quick example. I remember training you in the gym one day, and Tony Hargraves coming in the gym, and he just picked up something really quick, like where's the double head fake, not just the one head fake, but where's the double head fake? Because psychologically, players are taught to don't go for the head fake, but sometimes they're not taught to don't go for two head fakes.
Right.
And so it's those kinds of things that they played basketball, that they instilled in their kids, and just gave them a competitive advantage. So, a lot of this stuff is on the job training. The thing about life is that in experience, you get the test first and you get the lesson second, right? So that kind of stuff, you just had to go through it. You just really had to go through it.
Yeah, and just speaking on my experience, it was a big challenge, and there were pros and cons. The pros were I was actually good. You know what I mean? I had some game. So we see a lot of times coaches coach their kids, and they might not be as talented as the other players, but they start anyway. You know what I mean? And then here comes the controversy after that. But fortunately enough, with the team that I was playing with, I actually deserved the starting spot. However, there comes envy, there comes jealousy with certain players. You know what I mean? And you can't blame them. You know what I mean? You're 12 years old, you're 13. You're in the inner city with urban, around the urban areas where kids don't have fathers. So it was a big challenge for me. I'm not going to say interacting. I didn't really have a problem, but at times when you're by yourself in the locker room, sometimes you'll see that transition. But it actually prepared me to be mentally tough. I'll say the pros for that is I was so competitive that it was just fuel to the fire. You know what I mean? It was just like, now I got to get in the game and just improve myself. So I think I speak for a lot of coach son, what do you call that, comparisons, or just that space.
Right.
You know what I mean? Of that interaction is really complex. You know what I mean? Because when your dad subs you out, it's not your coach subbing you out. You know what I mean? It's your dad subbing you out. You going to the bench. So it's sometimes you take it personal at that age. You don't understand it. And you watch games, and I watch games now in the NBA when Austin Rivers played for his father. He played for Doc. You know what I mean? And I just want to see that exchange. You know what I mean? It's just so enlightening to see. So I want to share a story that I'll never forget. I was working security at NYU for about 2 years. And I remember you were in healthcare for about 20 years, and you switched 25. 25. Wow.
25.
So
nobody's counting.
Yeah, nobody is. So we you changed locations at the time, which was very cool for me because I was able to see you. So you were in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember coming to check you and we chopping it up, and it's just like, yo, I quit. I'm quitting my job. Like I never, like my parents, I looked at them as the hardest working people on the planet. You know what I mean? Those are the people I was under all the time. So mom was a teacher for 17, 18 years. Dad was in healthcare. So I was always around it. And when you said, I'm going back to school, it was such a shock for me. Mm-hmm. You go to school, you major in psychology.
And business.
Come on, I'm sorry about that.
That's
Hey,
okay.
wait, listen, man.
Okay.
Just thought that matters.
And honors.
And I'm getting there, brother.
Okay.
By the way, this is my dad. I'm gonna keep. So when you guys, hear me talking my stuff, I want you guys to understand where it's coming from. This is on wax. This is through the airwaves. Anyway, right? So let's stay focused. You graduate in 3 years, right?
2 years.
You graduate in 2 years.
100 credits in 2 years.
Whatever. You graduate in 2 years with a psychology degree.
And business.
In business. But majored in psychology, minored in business.
No.
Majored in both?
Majored in both.
Wow, that's different.
Double major.
Wow, listen, you learn something new every day, guys.
It's not that special. I'm just trying to get
right,
on
it's
records.
no problem. It's no problem.
Right.
So you major in business and psychology, graduate in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Gave a speech at graduation.
2 graduations.
2 graduations. I forgot about that. I was there for the first one. You gave a speech, but I wanna tap into the psychology thing. What would you take from psych now that you would transfer to you coaching back then?
Well, first,
or would you change anything?
Yeah. So first, I don't know the audience, but I just want to let them know it wasn't. I just didn't come downstairs and just say I quit my job. It just so happens. Before that, I lost my little brother in a motorcycle accident.
My uncle Jason,
Yep.
absolutely.
So that gave me a different perspective. I had been in healthcare for 20-something years as a director of IT and moving major hospitals on different platforms. It was incredibly demanding. Losing my little brother put a lot of things in perspective, and school had always been something I wanted to go back to because I was hiring all these people with degrees. I was talking to kids about going to school. So, oftentimes I felt like a walking hypocrite. So for me, it was just like, okay, I can't keep preaching this. It always in the back of my mind. But my job was so demanding that it just was impossible to go back to school. So I say all that to say when I made that decision, is why I went back to school, and with the little bit of money I had saved up, I had enough for about 2 years to really make this happen. So hence that's why I pushed myself to graduate in 2 years.
Right.
What did psychology do? Well, psychology did a lot because so I'll give you an example of what psychology helped me with in the game. The obvious is obvious, right?
Right.
Is that psychology, people, you get to understand people, what their motives are. That's the obvious stuff. But let me give you an insight into how I use psychology. So when I first got into the game, when I coach, oftentimes as coaches, you're always watching, what your kids are doing like you're supposed to and just trying to figure out, offenses, defense, whatever it is. My competitive advantage always was to look at the other kids on the team and what their behavioral cues to their parents were.
Right.
So, for example, if I was watching the star player from another team, I could see that his parents had figured out how to give him signals without yelling and, let's just say he wasn't scoring what they wanted him to score. Mm-hmm. So they would go past the coach. They would get past the coach and say, don't listen to what the coach says, I want you to score. So I'm watching this kid give his parents. You can easily figure out who his parents are because you can watch the eye contact.
Right.
So immediately, understanding that psychology, we would trap that particular kid, right? Because he's the best kid. We wouldn't always trap him because we want him to feel comfortable when we want to spring the trap on him when he least expect it. But what I would watch those behavior cues, what he was doing with his parents, the eye contact, when to go, because fathers give it away all the time.
Right. When
to go, they make hand gestures with their hands, the whole thing. So anytime I seen the father make this hand gesture to the kid, to his son rather, and I watch and I've talked to women coaches. We all talk about this, and when you watch that, you know when to set the trap. And what happens is when you set a trap or when you double, this kid just thinks, the player rather just thinks that why is this so hard for me to do?
Right.
And when I get the ball and I'm ready to pass it, nobody does anything to me, but in specific situations. So that's the psychology of it, is that really understanding what's across the table from you. So in a competitive fashion, I'm always understanding what is across the court from me.
Right.
How are we competing? What are you? It's a chess match. It's a chess match. So I owe a lot of that to psychology, but again, I owe a lot of that to experience. I will continue to say that experience gives you the test first, and then you get the lesson. So
Right.
I owe that to psychology and experience.
I remember us because I went to 3 different high schools. I spoke about that in the first episode, and every coach that I actually had wasn't as good as my dad, but I feel like where we failed at was we harped a lot on what they were doing wrong. And when you go back and speak about the technicalities of the game, is whatever position I'm in, how could we work with that? You know what I mean? And like I said, going back to that and talking about just being a smarter basketball player. I remember going to Tabor Academy, and I was always known to be a guard. You know what I mean? So Coach, shout out to Coach Millette. Coach Millette would put me in the post, but at the end of the day, there was nobody better than me at the post. You know what I mean? At that time. So figuring that out and just gaining wisdom now as you get older is, and I just want to speak for the parents, and both the parents and the players, is whatever position you in or situation that you're in, you got to adjust. And I feel like people in general, the best people, the most successors, adjust the best. You know what I mean? So, yeah, man, it was a big journey. So what would you tell yourself, Dad, from now that you did graduate, you're taking your master's now?
Right.
I was talking to my dad about 2 days ago, and he's like, yo, my dad is either he's always in a meeting or something. Even when he wasn't in school, it's like you got to call. When he picks up and he says my first name, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll talk to you later. So he was studying for a test 2 days ago. So now you're taking your master's.
Not a test. Not a test.
You wasn't studying for a test? Oh, just studying.
Intro to my thesis.
Oh my
brother.
God,
Yeah.
man, Jesus Christ.
I'm trying to be a role model.
Anyway,
You're in the
Jay,
building,
Jay,
so
I'm struggling over here.
I'm
Do you
trying
see
to be
me?
a role model.
Shout out to Jason Ron, man. He shoots all of my documentaries. That's the one. That's the video I sent you when I was the Good Vibes Only documentaries. That was in black and white.
Okay.
That's the man behind
Big
the camera.
up, Jace. Love the name.
Yeah,
Love the name.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I was doing the intro to my
your thesis.
Yes.
So, what would Dad tell the younger dad who actually didn't finish school at that time? What would Coach tell the other players who are struggling with school? What's the secret? Just tell us that.
What's
because
the
because you're at what? 46, you got it done. At 46, you made the decision.
Right.
That you wanted to go to school.
Right.
You graduate. That's not that it's unknown.
Right.
That it's impossible, but
not.
it's very difficult. It's a challenge.
It depends, right?
It depends. It's a challenge. What space are you in? What space do you get in? Now that you know, like, wow, like I'm done. What's the secret? Right. What's the end goal?
Well, I mean, for me, so one, it's nothing special at all. I'm around people that keep doing it. I meet people that's doing it every day. It's about committing to the commitment. Like for me, that's what it is. It's about committing to the commitment. And a lot of people use that word intentional, but I take that word and marry it with the word impact, right? So if you want to be intentional, well, what kind of impact do you want to have when it's all said and done? Right. So that's important. That's always been important to me. So it basically, if I could talk to my old self, you got to make the investment in yourself. There are they talk about the 3 addictions in life. And one is alcohol, and the second one is drugs. Right. And then the third one is a monthly paycheck. And I certainly was addicted to a monthly paycheck. I was making a lot of money. So I just felt like I didn't necessarily have to have these things. I necessarily didn't have to have school because I had this thing all figured out, right? Because that's what a monthly paycheck can do for you. So I love how uncomfortable my comfort zone was when I made the decision, how urgent it was to pass all these classes with honors. I was challenged. So let me be clear about that. My mentor challenged me to do the double major. My mentor challenged me to graduate with honors. My mentor challenged me to speak at my graduation. That part, I had no technical knowledge of how I was going to do that.
Right.
The first two was easy, just do the work. And pass classes with A's, that was easy. But the third one was a little bit more challenging, and I was able to get it done. And I can't say that I had a strategy to that until me and my mentor went back out and said that was the strategy. You get the first two done, and then everything else falls in place. You know, that old saying is, the more you practice, the luckier you get. So that's just how I approach it.
Is it addictive, though? Is it once you accomplish that and you feel that grind, that consistency, you see the results, is it addicting or is it just a process and you just move on?
I mean, for me, it's not addictive. It's just it's just you start understanding that, you know what, if you want something, you got to go get it. I mean, one of the things that I love about the process is that, like, not everybody can do it. So maybe that's the part that I fall in love with, is that, like, not everybody can do it. So if you do it, you put yourselves in the category with people that can do it.
Right.
So that's the part that that's the part I'm romantically involved with. Like,
right.
I just like being, like, in this other space. And there's a lot of other people in that space, but I just like being on the other side of the fence where, like, not everybody can do it. Like, there is a commitment to
right.
it.
I want to speak on two things because we speak about that a lot. One, being at the table with people that matter. And two, actually doing what you love, and I think that ties in with each other a little bit. And speaking back on my uncle, when he passed doing something that he loved to do. I remember the first motorcycle accident my Uncle Jason got in, and he cracked his liver, I believe.
No, you can't crack your liver.
He cracked his collarbone.
Yeah.
Can't crack your liver. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah. I don't know the grade I got in biology, but
we can only guess.
It's no problem. Mike, edit that, please. But anyway, he cracked his collarbone. Something happened to his liver. No,
nothing happened to his liver. He had a collapsed lung.
Oh, he had a collapsed lung. I remember that first accident.
Right.
I remember going to the hospital. And he had tubes in him or whatnot, and it was still a fun time. He was such a fun guy. I remember that we begged him not to get back on the bike. You know what I mean? He gets back on the bike, and he loses his life doing something that he loved. It's just an obsession when you really love what you do. And you speak on that going to college and just, hey, listen, I gotta go. Like, I have to, like, I quit my job. And I believe, and if you want to second that was part of your motivation. You know what I mean?
What was part of my motivation?
Part of your motivation, that understanding that Uncle Jason did something that he loved to do. And not the whole, I know that wasn't your whole, you always wanted to go to school.
Right.
But that was more fuel. I believe it fueled me to actually do the things that I love to do. I feel like doing what you love to do gives yourself peace, and it gives people around you that love you peace. When my uncle died, I think I gained a lot of peace understanding that, because a lot of deaths sometimes are unfortunate. You know what I mean? A lot of accidents happen. Yes, that was an accident, but I gained peace understanding that he did something that he loved to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm fine with that. And I'm at peace with that. And I just wanted to send a message before I started asking questions that, you know, doing what you love to do is not only for you, it's for a lot of people that love you as well, that they gain peace around you as well. And the respect for you, it increases and to a high level when you actually do what you actually were here to do.
That kind of peace is contagious.
Yeah.
So when you're peaceful, people can feel that. So yeah, I agree with that. That kind of, so that's why they pull for you when you're doing things that you love, because when you're peaceful, it's really contagious.
Right.
And people want to be around that.
Now let's get back to basketball and speak on a lot of high schools, especially public schools in the inner city, Catholic schools as well too. They run a lot of zone. They run a lot of, I'm not going to call it simple plays, but the 2-3 zone is very, very, very popular, right? Speak on that as far as, should we be learning something else? Is that the standard thing for high schools. I think people are sometimes, in my opinion, I think coaches are running 2-3 zones because it's just so popular at the end of the day. Sometimes the other team don't even have shooters, you know what I mean, or don't have big men to where you could just run this. Right. They're not adjusting to the players. I feel like they're just running plays just because it's there. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I mean, first, it works, right? Like bottom line,
right?
2-3 works. So, the closest thing I can say, and I've been away from just studying the game for a couple of years now. It works. So, I mean, I think what you can do is you can hack the system a little bit. You can, out of that 2-3, you can bring the man up a little early. And everybody's doing that. Everybody's hacking the system. But, I mean, it works. I mean, a 1-3 run works, in certain situations. A boxing one works in certain situations. I mean, you can even look at the professional game when I remember when you couldn't run zone in the NBA. And now you can switch in and out. I mean, they don't use it all for the whole game, but they'll run it, to just throw the momentum of the other team off. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the 2-3 zone because, again, I'm just going to keep saying it works. So, I just think that maybe the creativity needs to come from the offensive side, and there still is creativity. I think the problem is there's no traditional 2-3 zone being run. Like everybody modifies it a little bit and they cater to their talent, right? I think the only time you see it traditionally run where everybody's in exactly the same spot when in a matchup zone is typically when they're under-talented and they just have to play by the principles. But when you got a big that can cover ground, you hack it. You go and you let him roam a little bit. When you got guards that are incredibly fast, you take risks. You don't necessarily have them right at the elbow all the time. So it really is you look at your personnel. You just look at your personnel and then you kind of figure it out. So I don't think it's traditionally run all the time. I just think it works and you modify it the way, to how it helps you. So that's how I feel about that.
We speak about what's popular right now in basketball and in NCAA is the question of kids getting paid.
Right.
Should they get paid for their services? Because it is a service.
Right.
You know what I mean? Zion Williamson, when he came out of his sneaker, when he played UNC, I think tickets started at $2,500, I believe, when Barack Obama came to his game. Okay. Things like that, when you think about that. Should kids be getting paid for what they do when they're in college before they go to the league or go overseas? Do you think that that's a necessity, or should it stay where it's at?
Well, big shout out to California for passing a bill that I think it's 2023 that they will start. They're going to do the hard stuff now, and I think 2023 it rolls out where they're going to figure out how they do pay athletes.
Right.
And which just only means that every other state better catch up, because if I'm any kind of kid, whatever color I am, if I'm poor and you're paying me to play a sport that I love as early as 17 in college, I'm running to California, because not only am I running to California, it's sunny, the weather is beautiful, so that's just even more incentive is where you want to be at, and campuses are lovely in California. So so big shout out to them. Should students get paid? I mean, that's a really controversial question. And it's a hard question to figure out, because not everybody is a small percentage of student athletes that make it to the league.
Right.
A lot of people are talking about the men's game, but I think if we want to really start opening up the briefcase, let's go look at the women's game, because they're not even getting paid on the professional level. A small percentage of what men get paid on the professional level. Right. So, when we start rolling out the checks, let's roll the checks out for the women too. Let's not leave them out. Let's actually put them first. And I think that's where it should start. And then maybe there's an incentive, because women are staying in the game all 4 years for the most part, right? So from an economic perspective, I'm sure the struggle gets harder for them as they go on and on in their academic career. So should they get paid? Yes. How you do that? I'm not the professional in the room, but I just think that you put a lot of people together that kind of can work out those finances, and that all that all the economics of that. Because then you want to roll it out. What happens to the smaller schools, right? So you got UCLA and you got Duke in North Carolina. You got Michigan State. I'm sure they can figure that out. But what happens to the smaller school, like
the Lehighs and shout out to Zed, man.
Yeah,
Zed, what up? Former Riverside Hawks.
Yeah,
Hawks alum.
You're right.
Shout out.
Yeah. Elon, all these schools, all these smaller schools.
All of them.
That then you're gonna start having kids just go to the bigger schools. So you have to kind of figure it out. Maybe you build equity into the game post graduation. Maybe you incline students to graduate on time and do it the right way. Maybe there's some kind of committee that watches grades, and there's just a lot, and so you got to take a lot of that in consideration.
Because people don't understand, especially with star basketball players like Zion, like John Wall, like Kemba Walker. When we see these, they're still college kids. You know what I mean? Like when you're on campus, cafeterias still close at 11. You know what I mean? They're still hungry, no matter how you slice it and dice it. Right. But because they're on this screen, we feel like their lives are just on a different level. And it's not until they get drafted, hopefully by the grace of God, you know what I mean, or go overseas and get some money. But they're still college kids, you know what I mean? So like you said, it's very controversial, but it's something to look at, because while we're looking at you and we're paying cable, we're paying ESPN to watch these things on our phone, you know what I mean? We're getting tickets, we're buying hot dogs, we're buying drinks, we're in arenas watching these college kids. So it's something to actually look at. Now, for the past years, you've been big on marketing, Dad. I know we've been talking a lot about it. And you mentioned the women. Is there anything that you see that can actually change? Because women can't dunk, the majority of them, you know what I mean? So men are high flyers, you know what I mean? You see that in the commercials. What can happen? You see a lot of NBA players trying to support the WNBA, like coming to games. You see Iman Shumpert and whatnot. What can we actually do to shift that?
My opinion is that you just continue to support. You just it doesn't happen overnight. Right. You just continue to support, so that next 9-year-old growing up, when she grows up, she understands that there's a platform for her. I think that's where you have to start it. It's not an overnight success. Right. Like none of this. I mean, you hear the stories about how Magic and Bird saved the league. So obviously, and there were 2 different leagues at the time. So I mean, they had to collectively get together and figure out, how do we support this game? How do we market this game? Right. I just think you just continue to market the game. You continue to make sure that the platform is visible, so that next 9-year-old superstar knows and understands that there's a platform. So she begins to get better and better and better, and then you see something transformative in the game where somebody is taking off from the baseline, or somebody is just a monster on the boards, whatever it is. But I don't think that it's an overnight solution to this. There's no silver bullet to this. Right. There has to continue to be support. Just keep doing it.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird because I see, and it's probably a different market back then, but when I'm watching back then in WNBA, it was exciting, man. The Teresa Weatherspoons, the Cheryl Swoops, Rebecca Lobos, Lisa Leslie's of the world, and they weren't dunking yet. Right. You know what I mean? You see Maya Moore, you see Brittany Griner, like girls are really dunking, like you know what I mean? So it's weird because back then, I feel like more people were filling up the seats. You know what I mean? Now in this market, it's weird. You know, you can't. WNBA players don't even have their logos on their jerseys. You know what I mean? Everything is their whole sponsors on their jerseys. That's how down or in the hole economically they are. So it's kind of a weird transition if you really think about it. But I want to get semi-personal as far as coaching is concerned, the commitment. And I feel like this is not a message, but this is something for the coaches, because I see a lot of that, not just my dad. I see a lot of that in the coaches where in relationships, not that it shifts, but it's a challenge. You know what I mean? You have to overcome these kind of things. And I'm fortunate enough to have, a lot of mature talks with my dad. So when we speak on it, sometimes we speak on my stepmom, who kind of felt like, yo, you need to back away from this this basketball thing a little bit, because people don't understand this AAU thing is a commitment. You know what I mean, for both players and coaches. Speak on the adjustment and what you feel matters and what didn't matter at the time.
Well, your family always matters, right? And winning is universal, right? So as much as, you know, me and my wife, you know, would have these sit downs about like the commitment and you know, a lot of the time is spent outside of the house. When you come home with national trophies, that you know, that just says that it's all worth it, right? So winning is just not on the basketball court. Winning is transitions into everything in your life. So I think that once you know, she saw that I had made a full-in commitment, and that was she didn't have to see it. She was living it with me. So I'm watching game film all night. We out to dinner, and somebody calls me, and we're going over strategy. My coaches, Al and Derek and Ron Gerber, Michigan, and all these guys that have helped me. We spent hours and hours and hours on the phone going over I mean, to the smallest detail. Like, you know, sometimes it's like if this kid wears this shoe from the other team, we know what how he's feeling that night.
It gets like that,
So we knew. So she knew that I was all the way in, and I think that, you know, if I'm talking to any young coaches, older coaches, is look, don't go in halfway, because then you get a halfway. You get half of the support that you're looking for. You're looking to be fully supported by your kids and by your family. You need to be fully all the way in. So it's a commitment. And
that's big.
Yeah, it's a commitment.
That's big. That's big. Speaking on my experience is crazy, because at 18, I went to Tabor Academy for the last 2 years, and I had the privilege of running the camp. Mayflower camp. I remember moving with my dad when I was 18 years old. We was in Pomona, and I was working at Best Buy. And shout out to CJ Ward, who was like my best friend at the time in Tabor Academy. We ran a Mayflower camp for about like 60 kids. And prior to that, I gained that momentum from coaching some of your players, training some of your players at your complex, and going and training them and getting about $50 an hour, $75 an hour here, but was so focused on, because every kid wants to go to the league. It's just league. Every kid wants to go to the NBA, but sometimes, and speaking for me, that I had blinders on for what I was really good at. You know what I mean? And which was really teaching, which was really coaching and giving kids some inspiration. Because when I look at it, you know, I can't speak for anybody else. My mom's a teacher. My dad's in my life. He's in healthcare. He's a coach. You see what he did, and it's like, it's just meant to be. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Speak on the opportunities that basketball, this sport, can give you, because a lot of kids are focused so much on playing Division I basketball, not understanding Division II is a hell of a is a hell of a lane. You know what I mean? D3, you go to Brandeis, you'll start to notice guys are balling. You know what I mean? So speak on the opportunities that basketball can bring you, and, you know, how we should open up a little bit about that.
Right. Well, first of all, at every level, D1, 2, and 3, there's studs at every single level.
Absolutely.
Obviously, a little bit more at the D1 level. And then, unfortunately, it's that D1 disease where everybody has to play D1. And nobody's true north is just in a straight line. Sometimes you got to go D2 or go D3 to get to a D1 school. But what the sport does for anyone, if you take it seriously, just exposes you to so many opportunities. I mean, even myself, I think I did more traveling as a coach than I ever did just going on vacation, right? So, you know, I have close friends in Puerto Rico that because we played them in nationals, and we talked after the game, and what do you do and how do you do it, and then we saw each other in Maryland, and then we started saying, hey, we're kind of following each other, and we would exchange text messages about what you're doing, how you doing it. And then when I, you know, went to Puerto Rico for a couple of times, it was as soon as I came in, you know, as soon as I landed, it was the whole team was there, and I'm eating a different kind of meal. I'm not just eating at the local, such as, you know, I'm in people's homes, and I'm understanding their culture and what they're about and what makes them tick. And so
basically, just to like you're on now. It's not Puerto Rico Nationals. Like you're
I'm
you're
in their
on
house.
vacation.
Yeah,
You're
in
in
their,
vacation, right?
I'm in their house. We're talking.
Absolutely.
We're talking about things that matter. We're talking about things that are important to them outside of basketball, right?
Right.
And so, and that's the kind of exposure. That's what sport does. Not necessarily just basketball, but that's what all sport does. It just gives you a different exposure. You travel, you see things, you understand things, and if you are conscious of what's going on, you come back and you tell those stories about how important it is the people that you met, and it changes your biases. It hacks into your biases. Rather, it doesn't change it, but it hacks your biases sometimes. Sometimes when somebody says, "Well, this is how I see it," when you say, "No, it just doesn't happen in the Bronx like this, or it just doesn't happen in Harlem like this.
Right.
It happens like this in Boston, or it happens like this in Kentucky or Puerto Rico." So that's the beauty of sport, is that we fight in and for the same jersey. So and everything else kind of falls by the wayside.
Right. It's crazy because you see things. We spoke about that too, about Jamal Mashburn, and I went to Cardinal Hayes my first year. Shout out to Jamal Mashburn. He went to Cardinal Hayes. When me and you spoke about him, we spoke about his story. He was saying that he, as a commentator, because he commentated for sports, I think it was ESPN, he was happier then than he was playing basketball, at that time. You see the Jalen Roses of the world. You see the Jason Williams, who got into a motorcycle accident, and, his career as a basketball player was over, and now he's commentating and he's having a ball. You know what I mean? In Riverside, one of the coaches, I forget his name, light-skinned dude who coached for St. John's. He's tall guy. Then he got transferred. I think he went to another team. He was he was tall, glasses, light-skinned guy, coached for St. John's. I forgot his name, but I remember just being nosy because you guys.
Oh, you talking about Fred?
Big Fred.
Well, he's at Kansas.
He's
now.
at Kansas now. Assistant coach, one of the assistant coaches for Kansas. He spoke. Matter of fact, I was being nosy, but you shared the story with me anyway in the car, and was saying, "Yo, did you know Fred told me he didn't work for 20 years?" And I was like, "What are you talking? What does that mean?" You know what I mean? And he's like, "I didn't work for 20 years. I get up, I dress in sweats and a t-shirt every day. I go to practice. I coach. I make over 3 figures every year. You know what I mean? I make 100,000 or more every year, or 6 figures. Sorry, I make 100,000 or more every year, and I'm having a blast. You know what I mean? So I think kids are more attracted to the glam of the sport more than the freedom.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think people see a check first more than they do the freedom of it. And I think that's just really important, man. Just now, doing a podcast is just I have a sense of freedom. You know what I mean? Where I can talk about things, where I can reminisce about basketball, because look how it's sticking with me. You know what I mean? Just picking up this basketball, all the free throws we shot, all the jump shots we used to shoot in Basketball City, like I'm here today. You know what I mean? Speaking on these things. So I really feel like that's just really important. That's really important. Any challenges that coaching AAU that you had with kids that that you take with you forever? Any like distinct memories that you had with a player?
I mean, we talked about that. So there's one particular player, and shout out to Cameron Winter, playing for Drexel, starting point guard. I think he's in his second year, rookie of the year, rookie of his conference last year. And he'll smile because I know all of that, and, and him and I haven't talked, but I secretly talk to his parents every now and then on text. Cam was a big part of our success. I got kind of caught up in the success. Cam struggled a little bit. Again, I talked about like not starting a player sometimes, taking a player from a starting position and putting them on the bench. Sometimes a player would just rather just go to another team. That was the kind of situation that was, and I was wrong for that. Just that Cam performed at such a high level, And sometimes as a coach, when you're caught up in, I mean, any of these coaches and they notice as an AAU schedule and you playing at that Division I AAU schedule, it's grueling. I mean, one year we literally played 140 games. We're talking about 10 and 11-year-olds playing 140 games for the whole year. So Sometimes you just feel like they got to bring it every single day. You just believe everybody has to. It's just not them. I mean, you as a coach, you ask that of your assistant coaches, you ask that of your parents,
Right.
to bring it 140 times at 110%
Right.
is a lot. So, I think I was, and he was my best player. He was my captain. He was my barometer to everything when I tried to understand what was going on in the court,
Right.
on the basketball court. When things looked fuzzy while we were struggling, I could always look or go to him. So it's a challenge sometimes when you make a decision to go in a different direction. When do you pivot? When do you
Right.
change directions? When people start slowing down. Sometimes what happens is one team becomes your nemesis that you just can't beat.
Right.
And instead of just saying, let's just get better, you start tailoring your team just to beat this one team.
Right.
And then what tends to happen is you go away from what the numbers tell you, right? The numbers tell you that what you got right here beats 95% of all the teams, right? And then you get this one nemesis that says you can't beat this team, right? And what you tend to do is you start tweaking your team, and then it becomes a seesaw. Now, all of a sudden, 80% of the teams, you only can beat 80 to 75% of teams that you used to beat in the past, and then you start questioning yourself. So, for me, in hindsight, I would just say, look, if there's one team I just couldn't beat, we got to get up for that game, because if we're beating 95% of the other teams, then so be it. So I made a big mistake in that. And when I talk to young coaches, I tell them to look at the numbers, look at the data. Shout out to going to college and being really good at business statistics, like just taking a gem out of that and just really looking at the numbers and saying, look, we're beating 95% of the teams, period.
Right.
Period. End of story. 95%. We're beating them before they get on the court.
Right.
We're beating them when we fly into the state. We've already beat them. So why change because we can't beat one team? We just got to figure that out. So if we could do it all over again, I would have rolled with that. And so, and that's one player in particular. Again, Cameron Winter. Shout out to Drexel.
Right.
I'm watching your games online, son. So if you want to call me and figure out what you need to do better, we can have a great conversation. But so it's important to understand what's really happening off the court, or what's really happening on the court, rather, is look at your numbers. Right. So don't make huge changes if, for the most part, you're doing a lot of things right.
Absolutely. Shout out to Cam, man. Beautiful, beautiful kid. Beautiful soul, beautiful family. And I've watched him grow up. And it was always him and Zed in the backcourt. If anybody from Riverside who actually knows about that, Gauchos too, Renz, all of these guys, probably at one time at what age? About 10, 11. It's probably the best backcourt in the city.
Oh, it was the best backcourt in the city. We had to argue about the country, but it was definitely the best backcourt in the city.
Right.
So
that's dope. Do you miss the game, Dad, or what? Because you've been away from coaching for a little bit.
No, I don't miss the game as much. I like talking about the system now. I don't miss the game at all. First of all, I don't miss it because I don't know it like I used to, right?
Okay.
And you got to be in that proximity. You got to be in that space. So I don't miss it because I don't know it. If I get back into it like that, I'm a student. I mean, obviously, I bring a lot more to the table just being a rookie at it. But I don't know it has changed. The psychology of it has changed. We're in an attention economy, so it's the one thing I love about sports is that you can't practice with your phone.
Right.
But after practice, everybody runs to their phone. So that was a little bit different from when I was coaching. So I don't miss it like that. I do love talking about the system. So, like we talked about earlier about California getting ready to pay players. I'm watching stuff like that. I'm watching how college kids approach the game and the decisions that they make to leave the game or stay in the game.
Right.
That kind of stuff. I like the system of the game.
Right. And speaking about your psychology and business degree, anything that comes up in mind about how to actually help players, because we speak on that a lot off camera about things like kids getting injured. You know what I mean? What mental space you should be in.
Right.
You know what I mean? Depression, all of this mental health is big now. You know what I mean? So speak on some of that, because I've
We talking about school?
We're talking about the mental capacity for players, period. You know what I mean? Some who are struggling in school, players that get injured, players who are going through things in the household. You know what I mean? Because for me, my ankles are like butter. You know what I mean? I was always always getting injured. So just that mental space to be in, just overcoming a lot of challenges. So.
Well, the physical challenges come with the game, come with the sport. So that part, the more you know about how your body reacts and works, and researching medicine, and you got to obviously know that you're growing. So at the same time that you're growing, you're putting a lot of pressure on your body and a lot of wear and tear in your body already. We talked about how our team played 140 games in 1 year. With no load management, guys. Just shout out to no load management.
Okay.
So you gotta know your body. That's gonna happen. So being aware of that is one. So that's from the physical perspective. From a mental perspective, is it's just really important to put other things in your life, right? One of the things that my teams did really, really well. And I'm just looking back at it and saying why they did that really well is that my parents always made the trip something else, a learning trip. So if we went to Kentucky when John Wall was a freshman getting ready to come out, when we played I think we played Division II at that time. The thing about us, we were always a Division I team, but my parents were, I'm going to say this, and I'm being funny. My parents were incredibly bougie. So wherever the tournament was at, if it wasn't a classy place that we were going, so I think one year the Nationals for Division I was in Detroit. And when I say class, I mean if there's not enough things to do to occupy that space.
Grandma Tony, I second this. I second that. Right. I'm joking. I might get in trouble.
So the parents weren't interested in where we were going. They wouldn't go. So I remember we were in Kentucky because they figured out Kentucky was a better place to be at. And they just did all kinds of things. Went to Kentucky, sat in John Wall's locker, toured the whole campus. They always did, and I thought that was always important. And as I look back at, as I'm a witness to some of the things that my students are doing, or my kids are doing, they're in college. They look well-rounded from the outside. We're all struggling on the inside, but they look well-rounded. And that's incredibly important. So from the mental aspect, it's just exposing yourself to more than just basketball. Just doing that.
Mike, I'm going to take a little break for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap this thing up. You're tuned in to Hood Center Podcast. This is season 2. My dad is in the building, y'all, as a guest. Keep it locked. Yes, sir.